more.
My name is David Burnett. I'm a photographer from New York and Washington, D.C. in the States, one of the founding members of Contact Press Images, the photographic agency that's based in New York, and which next year will be celebrating 30 years in the business. No small feat, let me say. And I'm here having a wonderful time seeing a lot of my colleagues and some great photography in Perpignan.
Nah. Now with a natural knack, if you forgot to track the rest, your cardiac like a heart attack, attest to the fact that a nigga format, yo, I bring the thing forward and I cock it back. Hold your safety to press the trigger, drop the clip and let the kid walk home safely. Out of danger, stream, trying to maintain the population, so never never change the
really, for the first time ever, I've been in Perpignan for a day and a half, and it's truly a nice gathering. It's a chance to meet a lot of photographers who I either haven't met before or just met very briefly, and even though even here things are kind of very rushed, but it's nice to have a chance to see some of the colleagues at a time when you can just sit and have a glass of rosé and not feel bad about feeling bad. When I was 16, my second year of high school, I applied for the yearbook, which is the big photo book that you do every year at a high school in the States. And I made it to the photographic staff. I just signed up and they would sign me there. So all of a sudden there I was, a photographer. I learned how to take pictures, develop them in the darkroom. The pictures were not very exciting. It was the French club, it was the choir, football games, but it was really a chance to start taking pictures and very quickly discover that it's something that I really like to do. Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of pictures that have touched me over the years. I can certainly think of just out of the blue, there's a picture from 1967 in Wales when a giant mountain near a coal mine and this big hillside crashed down into a schoolhouse and killed a bunch of children. And this was one of those things that when I saw it in Life magazine really marked the way I thought about photographers, and I was so touched by it, I was so moved by it that, I don't know, I mean, it's hard to really know what creates motivations, but certainly that was a set of pictures which made me feel like being a photographer was something I wanted to do. It's not really what I would call a retrospective. It isn't everything I've ever done. It isn't anything that's so particular, other than as I started to go through a lot of my older and sort of medium-age material, I discovered that there was a certain look to many of these pictures, that there was this kind of distance, and we started to kind of talk about it as to whether or not that meant something. So while I would never be really disrespectful of the line that's attributed to Robert Capa, which is, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're probably not close enough. For these pictures, and I think just generally as a point of departure for photographers to think about what it is they're doing, if you say that if your pictures aren't good enough, you might be too close. And I always add, you might be. Peut-être. You might be, because there are a lot of reasons why your pictures may not be good, but that could definitely be one. And it kind of opens you up to seeing things in a different way and showing more context in the photographs, a little more of what, not just focusing on one little element of it, but the whole picture, and trying to see if that maybe illuminates the information in a little broader terms than if you just close in on something. So much has changed in the world of photography in the 50 years since Robert Capa was working. Nowadays, instead of just having a couple of lenses, maybe a 35 wide angle and a 85 or a 100 millimeter telephoto, regularly people shoot with a 17 millimeter or a 16 millimeter or a 200 or a 300. So it means you have all these kinds of possibilities as a photographer that didn't even really exist 50 years ago. So that the mere need to physically get closer to your subject doesn't always mean that it's something in this day and age that you have to do. What is important, what I think is really important, is that you feel a closeness to the subject, whether it's at 1 meter or at 25 meters or 100 meters. And that's perhaps kind of close enough. When you talk about getting close, maybe that's the kind of close we should be looking at.
Something he's never done before. Hey buddy, you're paranoid. Really now. Don't you be paranoid. Come on. I'm saying that it's true. They're all mocking you. Come on. Wow.
The work covers a large period of time. It's almost 35 years. And it's kind of the era of modern photojournalism. So I think it's kind of in a way that a paleontologist might look at the rocks where a dinosaur bone was discovered. It gives a little bit of the sense of what the equipment was like at the time the pictures were taken.
Do the most delicious is, and the winner gets the privilege of an obedient populace, bragging rights and blue ribbons. It's obnoxious kids, and ain't nobody stopping it. They're paranoid.
I'm not saying this is how you have to do it. All I'm trying to do is shed a little bit of light on what me as one photographer, what I as one photographer have done my own work, you know, and it's just a way to kind of understand it, because in many ways you see the whole transformation from the very first basic 35 millimeter reflex cameras through the more advanced reflex cameras, the medium format and the large format cameras. And it's just a little, it's all information. It's all just extra little bits of information that kind of help paint a whole picture. In a way, the form becomes part of the picture. There's no question about it. But one of the things that I've done as a photographer is to try and use other cameras other than just one kind of camera, and in using those cameras try and get an additional sense of what might be interesting and how each camera serves as a tool to try and get certain kinds of pictures. Because a picture you take with the 4x5 camera will be much different than a picture you take in the same moment with a digital camera or a 35 millimeter camera. I found it very interesting to try and explore, let's say with a 35 or a 50 millimeter lens on a digital camera, it's kind of like a general view, like that. To get that same coverage of area with the big 4x5 inch camera, you need a lens that's 180 millimeters, so it's 180 instead of like 40 or 50. But it means that because you have a 180 lens, the depth of field is much shallower. So if I photograph somebody 15 meters away or 10 meters away, they will be sharp, but everything this side on the other side of them will be out of focus and kind of just bring your eye right to that subject. In digital, you can't really do that unless you start playing around in Photoshop after the fact and trying to do something with the image after the fact. To me, the joy is trying to make it happen as I shoot the picture. And even though I don't always know what I'm going to get, but I try and have some idea of how it's going to look when I shoot that picture. And when it works, it really looks great. There's a lot of failure in this work because so many things can go wrong. You do everything right, but then you forget to pull out the slide that lets the film get the exposure. You do that, and you actually have it set to the wrong shutter. You don't remember to stop the lens down. I mean, everything you do with a large camera, you have to do yourself manually. There's nothing automatic. So you have to you think about it, but in the back of your mind, you're trying to remember which film did I shoot and which one did I not shoot. Because the only thing worse than no exposure is maybe a double exposure, where I have one picture from the Olympic Games, basketball with a horse running through the game. Because earlier in the day I'd been at the equestrian event, So I did a picture of a horse jumping. So this picture now has been exposed 2 times. So the horse is now running through the basketball game. This picture will never be published, believe me.
Nobody wants to know a guy with a reputation lower than a blue butterfly. Nobody wants to know a guy who'll wrap you around the world, then tell you lies. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
The one with Carl Lewis, there's a cameraman in the bottom of the frame. You know, I think that only comes from the fact that a lot of the places that I took pictures, there were TV people everywhere. And as you know, they're like mosquitoes. They swarm around and they always get in the way. So when they get in the way, I take a picture and they're in the picture. One of the phrases people used to say was, you know, how did you take that shot? Well, F8 and be there. Essentially, be there is the main thing. You have to see it or be able to be in a place where you can let your camera see it, you know, whether it's a phone or with the camera itself. But be there is the main thing, and now that everybody has a phone and everybody's phones take pictures, these small pictures, we're going to have a lot more events in which you're going to see that the pictures will be fuzzy and not very good quality, but they'll be by the people who were actually there. Because those people are now going to have cameras in large numbers and be in place probably for the first time. On a critical event, everybody will want those pictures. And on the non-critical event, probably nobody will want those pictures. I carry a camera in my phone, and what do I use it for? I take a picture of a lunch I'm having and I send it to my daughter with some joke attached to it. I mean, that's about as serious as it gets to me. When the quality of the cameras gets much better, maybe things will change, but right now it's not a real issue.
Come on. It's true. They're all mocking you. Come on.
This show includes a lot of events, that's true. I mean, we were trying to put together something that was in keeping with the spirit of the festival, which is really about photojournalism, rather than just some beautiful photograph that you could hang on a wall as art. Now, I think some of the pictures probably fall into that category. Part of all of us would like to feel like what we're doing is art or has some real artistic merit. So, I mean, I'm not against it. In fact, I kind of detest this snobism about, since it's journalism, it can't be art. Of course it can be. I mean, Guernica, the painting by Picasso, was in his head, but it was based on an event. I mean, you could say he was an illustrator of the news, I suppose. You know, we are out there in the real world, and there's, I don't think, anything inherently less qualifying about the real world than there is a kind of a made-up world. It still takes a point of view and an artistic eye to try and make a good picture. The more magazines that publish them, the more people can see them. But I'm also a realist, and I know that some of my pictures just get used to wrap up fish at the fish market. So that's okay too. There's, amongst the very few people, the photographers, and the work that they do is respected, but you know, so much of what we even hear about photographers in the public eye is all about the paparazzi chasing movie stars. I mean, whoever talks about photographers? Nobody. So in the end, it kind of reflects badly on us, even though we don't have anything to do with what the paparazzi do. They kind of live their own lives, you know. It's not a place where everybody only does what they're told to do. We all have the free will to try and do something. So, you know, I choose to do the kind of photography I want to do, and I just hope that along the way a few other people like it.
where does it go? Where would it go without me?